Hello and welcome to Season 7 of Buffy and the Art of Story. If you love Buffy the Vampire Slayer and you love creating stories or just taking them apart to see how they work, you're in the right place. This time we're looking at Season 7, Episode 22, the finale of the entire series, Chosen, where Buffy, Faith, and the Potentials make a final attempt to defeat the first evil. I am Lisa M. Lilly, author of the Awakening Supernatural Thriller series, the QC Davis crime novels, and the Writing as a Second Career books for writers. Along with a recap of Chosen, today I'll talk about the challenges of winding up a very long-form story, why all that we know about these characters makes this finale so compelling, how inconsistency undermines some of the story's impact, whether the scythe's spell and other solutions are too convenient, and how to write a happy ending while ensuring a final battle takes a toll. I started to say that, as always, there will be no spoilers, and it occurred to me that this is the last episode, so yeah, no spoilers. Kind of sad. So I'll just say no spoilers for Angel. How about that? Remember, if you'd like to get more Buffy and the Art of Story content and help keep the podcast going out into the world, you can join the Patreon community at patreon.com/Lisa M. Lilly. That's patreon.com/LISA MS in Marie LILLY. Okay, let's dive into the Sunnydale Hellmouth one last time. Chosen aired on May 20, 2003. It was written and directed by Joss Whedon, and I will be including comments about some of the DVD commentary by Joss Whedon on the episode. Chosen begins where the last episode ended, with Angel and Buffy kissing. Angel says he guesses she's happy to see him. Buffy starts to ask what he's doing there, but then stops and says no, she just wants to bask. They look into each other's eyes for a second or two, and then Buffy says, she's not so much with the basking. What's he doing there? I found this an interesting contrast to the long moments where we saw Spike and Buffy in that montage, sitting on the bed fully clothed and gazing into each other's eyes. Not sure if that was purposeful, but very interesting. Angel says he's not here saving a damsel in distress, that's for sure. And Buffy says he knows her. She's not much for the damseling, and she picks up the scythe. And by the way, it made me very nervous when she dropped it, apparently assuming Caleb was dead, and as we'll find out, he's not. Angel said he heard about everything that's been going on and asks if it is the first evil, that same power that tried to convince him to kill himself. Nice callback to amends. Buffy tells him the first is more ambitious now. It's raising an army. Angel starts to say it'll fail and show her this big file folder he brought with information, but Caleb slugs him from behind with a giant club or bone. Black streaks of liquid are running down Caleb's face. His eyes are black, and Angel flies across the floor and is knocked out. And Caleb, ever the gentleman, says, "Are you ready to finish this, bitch?" And we go to credits. On return, Buffy and Caleb fight. Buffy keeps hold of the scythe, asks how many times she has to kill him, ballpark figure. He slams her against the ceiling, then the floor. He taunts her. Does she think she has power over him? He calls her a stupid girl. As they both get to their feet again, he tells her she can't stop him. You don't have the... and Buffy is concentrating on her swing. She heaves that scythe straight up and slices upward between his legs. Caleb gasps, breathes hard, stares in shock at Buffy, and she says, "Who does nowadays?" Then with both hands, she keeps swinging that scythe all the way up, and as we'll find out later, splits him in two. On the DVD, Joss Whedon said, yeah, it was a little on the nose to split Caleb in half from the crotch, but he thought that character earned it, and I agree. I see killing Caleb as the story spark for the finale, It winds up the Caleb-specific arc, and now all the focus is on trying to defeat the First and its army of Ubervamps. Angel wakes up and says he's pissed. Where's Caleb? Buffy looks one way and then the other and says he had to split, then starts laughing. Spike, remember he was there off to the side, out of sight, watching all of this. He sees that, he's listening, and the First, as Buffy says to him, yeah, she needs you real bad. Buffy tells Angel she'll have the team go through the file he brought. Angel admits the source is not remotely reliable, and there was an Angel episode, I believe at the end of it, Wolfram and Hart gave him this file and this heavy chain that he shows her with this large kind of gaudy pendant on it. I didn't cover that in crossover because most of it did not, or pretty much all of it, but that last moment did not deal with Buffy. Buffy jokes she's got nothing that goes with that pendant. He tells her it's not for her, it's for someone ensouled. It bestows strength on whoever wears it. It's powerful and dangerous. The wearer needs to be someone stronger than human. Angel says he'll wear it and, quote, shoulder to shoulder, I'm yours, end quote. But Buffy says no. She can't risk him in this fight. If she loses and this thing gets past Sunnydale, it'll be days or maybe hours before the whole world goes. This tells us for sure that we are contemplating that this would go beyond Sunnydale, and if Angel couldn't stop it, maybe would go to the entire country or the entire world. Buffy tells Angel she needs him to run a second front. He says okay, but he's sure there's another reason. Buffy denies it as they walk out of the temple and into the graveyard. Angel asks if it's Spike. He can smell Spike all over her. He remembers his scent. Buffy tells him the whole vampire smelling things is pretty gross. Joss Whedon said he thought Angel and Buffy should end their relationship for this show in the graveyard because it is iconic for them and their relationship. And I had not thought about that before, but it is very fitting. You think of all the graveyard scenes with Buffy and Angel. Buffy asks if it's Angel's business when he wants to know if Spike is her boyfriend. Angel asks if she's in love with him. She doesn't answer and he's confused. This is Spike. Buffy tells him Spike has a soul now, and being petty, Angel says, that's great, quote, everyone's got a soul now, end quote. And he adds that he started it, having a soul. Buffy asks if he's 12, but he's not happy getting the brush off for Captain Peroxide. And Whedon on the DVD said that Petty Angel is his favorite Angel, and I have to agree. I love when Angel is being petty, and David Boreanaz does it so well. Buffy asks if he's going to come to Sunnydale and get all Dawson, a reference to Dawson's Creek, another show at the time, every time she has a boyfriend. Nice callback to Angel crossing over and harassing Riley in season 4. Angel says, aha, she said boyfriend. But Buffy tells him Spike's not, but he is in her heart. And Angel says that'll end well. Buffy asks what was the highlight of their relationship, when they broke up or when she killed him. And this is sad in many ways for Angel. We don't dwell on it because this isn't his show, but Buffy doesn't know about I Will Remember You when Angel was human and they had that one part of a day and night together. Buffy says she doesn't see fat grandchildren in the future with Spike, but she doesn't think that matters now. In the middle of all the insanity, a couple of things are starting to make sense for Buffy. The fat grandchildren reference stuck out to me because that is what the First as Jenny Calendar said to Angel when he was at Giles' apartment seeking help. I'm pretty sure that's where it happened. And he's asking the First, like, what does it want? And she says, well, I want to die surrounded by fat grandchildren, but that's not going to happen because Angel killed Jenny. I'd love to know if that was a purposeful reference because as a finale should, this episode has a lot of those subtle callbacks, or if it's just that's a phrasing that sticks out in Joss Whedon's head or one of the other writers. Buffy tells Angel that the guy thing is one of those things that's starting to make sense. She always thought there was something wrong with her because she couldn't make it work, but maybe she's not supposed to. And Angel says, because you're the Slayer. But Buffy is not going there. She says instead, okay, I'm cookie dough. I'm not done baking. I'm not finished becoming whoever the hell it is I'm going to turn out to be. I make it through this and the next thing and the next thing. And maybe one day I turn around and realize I'm ready. I'm cookies. And then, if I want someone to eat or enjoy warm, delicious cookie me, then that's fine. That'll be then when I'm done. Angel says, any thoughts on who might enjoy, do I have to go with a cookie analogy? And Buffy answers, I'm not really thinking that far ahead. That's kind of the point. I love this because it is what I kept thinking earlier in the season, back in Conversations with Dead People, and a couple of other episodes further back when Anya was saying, well, maybe there's something wrong with Buffy after Riley left. Buffy's 19, 20, 21. Does she have to have this figured out now? So I do like that, though I remember it took me a bit by surprise when I first watched the episode because it did not seem like we saw any point where Buffy did work that through. Joss Whedon commented on that on the DVD. He said that Marty Noxon pitched the cookie dough speech, maybe didn't involve cookie dough, but this type of speech very early in the season. And Joss Whedon felt as showrunner he could have done a better job of getting Buffy to that point, that it comes a little out of the blue. He loved Marty's idea that Buffy does not have to find the perfect guy at age 21 or 22, but wished he had built to it a little more. And he said the speech also solves how to have Buffy kissing Angel and then spending the night with Spike right after that. Angel now says sometime is something, but she tells him it'll be a long time from now, years if ever, and he tells her he's not getting any older. This part always frustrates me. Joss Whedon said it was a way to give the Buffy and Angel fans hope, and I get that, but my challenge is it just does not fit their history. This is one of the inconsistencies that really took away from the episode for me on first watch. On rewatches, I don't care so much. I'm there for the emotions of it. But up until now, Buffy and Angel, we have known, are never going to get together, largely because of the curse and all the reasons that Angel left the first time and all the reasons he chose to become human again in I Will Remember You. It was never about Buffy not being ready or Buffy rejecting him or putting him on hold. The best I can do with it is to headcanon that, okay, maybe in the future there could be something where he could be human again, or the curse could be lifted, or there's a way to get around it. But that takes an awful lot of work to fill in. I feel like my brain had to grapple with that when I watched Chosen the first time. Buffy goes home. Dawn is there, not happy about Buffy's attempt to have Xander drive her away from everything, and she kicks Buffy, not hard, and calls her a dumbass. Buffy just looks at Xander, and he says this is a Summers thing. Buffy looks at Dawn again and says, if you get killed, I'm telling. This is a really nice callback to the early episodes where Dawn first appeared and they were always complaining to Joyce about each other, Buffy and Dawn. Willow and Giles are there too. Buffy holds up the scythe and tells them it slices, dices, and makes Julianne preacher. They're all thrilled that Caleb is dead. Down in the basement, Spike is working out by punching a punching bag. Behind him, there is a line drawing of Angel on the wall with X's for eyes and spiky hair. Buffy enters. Spike asks how tall Darkened Forehead was. I love that line. It might be my favorite for the episode because I also love Spike when he's being petty and jealous. Buffy guesses Spike could smell Angel on her, and Spike says, yeah, plus his enhanced vampire eyeballs saw Buffy kissing Angel. She tells him she was just saying hello, and Spike says, most people don't use their tongues to say hello, or I guess they do, but Buffy tells him there were no tongues and Angel is gone, and Spike responds, oh, just pop by for a quickie then. Buffy tells him she's had enough jealous vampire crap for one night, and she scoffs at his drawing and says one of these days she'll put him and Angel in a room and let them wrestle it out, and then she smiles a little and muses about there could be oil involved. Spike demands the trinket her sweetie bear gave her. If Angel's not wearing it, Spike's the qualified one. He's got a soul. Buffy holds on to the pendant. She tells him it's volatile. And Spike responds, then she'll need someone strong. Is she planning on giving it to Andrew? Buffy tells him it's meant to be worn by a champion. And Spike looks down, clearly thinking she's not going to give it to him, but the music soars. Buffy hands it to Spike, closing his hand over it, and gives him a look. And Spike says, been called a lot of things in my time. And he is obviously so pleased that Buffy sees him that way. She starts to say that Faith still has her bedroom, but he tells her she can't stay there. She's still got angel breath, and he has his pride. Buffy says she understands. She's a little sad, but she starts to leave. Spike rushes around in front of her to stop her and says clearly she doesn't. The pride thing was a smokescreen. Buffy is relieved. They laugh together, and she puts her hand on his cheek. The scene cuts to them lying on his cot. They're both dressed. He's asleep with his arm over her. Buffy is awake, and she gets up, and the scene fades to her standing in the basement near the stairs, Spike still asleep across the room behind her. Joss Whedon said the key to this scene with Spike after the reunion with Angel is to have the audience go through what Buffy does. So we make that journey with her. And he said Spike is who is in Buffy's life now. He liked Buffy and Spike together so much because their vulnerabilities came out. And he noted that that was also true for Sarah Michelle Gellar and James Marsters as actors. And that is why it works so well. And this is such a good example of how do you transition a character or transition your readers or viewers when it is something challenging like this, when they might not understand how is this character kissing Angel and being so thrilled to see him and then spending the night with Spike. And this really does take it through all Buffy's feelings about it, the jealousy of Angel, the sadness of knowing it can't work out, recognizing she's not ready for something permanent, then seeing Spike dealing with his jealousy, dealing with her feelings, all the ups and downs that lead to her then staying and sleeping there. Joss Whedon also said the idea behind Buffy and Spike sleeping together this night is that there's enough trust that it was physical and romantic, but not sexual. And that was in response to the attempted rape. He said Spike didn't understand the boundaries of the relationship and didn't have a soul. And he can be redeemed, but not in the Luke and Laura where she marries her rapist type of redemption. And that is a reference to a soap opera. I forget which one, but very big, maybe 5 years before Buffy came out where that actually happened. So TV has evolved from there, and I like that he makes that distinction. And he said it's also not about redemption as in all is forgiven, but that Spike is a human who did a wrong thing and who still counts as human, and they can have trust. He commented that it is a very fine line to walk, and it really, really is. I think it is done very well in this season. You all know I have my issues with having the character of Spike do that at all and what it did to the story. But I do feel like coming back from that was well handled. I know that not all fans feel that way, and I think that does show that it is a real challenge to address that. Around 12 minutes into the episode, the first appears to Buffy as Caleb. And the first admits it was pain to lose Caleb, which it refers to as its right arm, but it doesn't need an arm. It has an army. Then it makes fun of Buffy's army of wannabe slayers. Buffy suggests the first consider a cool name, maybe the Taunter, since it's incorporeal and basically powerless. But it cuts her off and says its army will overrun the earth and it will be made flesh. Buffy acts unimpressed, but the first says if she's not worried, why isn't she asleep in her dead lover's arms? Answering its own question, it says because he can't help her, and neither can Faith or her friends or the Wanna Slay Brigade. None of them will ever know real power unless Buffy's dead. The first turns from Caleb into Buffy and repeats the into every generation a slayer is born speech from the opening credits, emphasizing that she alone will have the strength, and the first pauses and says, there's that word again. What Buffy is, how she'll die, alone. Whedon said he had the first say this as Buffy to show essentially Buffy telling herself that she's alone, because the whole point of this season and the series has been that Buffy is alone. I just want to take this time to say again, thank you for going on this journey with me to explore Buffy. I will be back in 2 weeks to talk about the last 5 episodes of season 7, and then I'll be jumping into Angel the series, but I didn't want to do that without noting how much it has meant to me to share this with you and how much has changed since I began the podcast in late 2019, including in the online world and social media. I first met Roberta, who often comments on the show and who has guested on Twitter over a shared love of Buffy and Mad Men. I met my friend Shiromi Arcerio, who has narrated a couple of my audiobooks since then, and we collaborated on a Pride and Prejudice audiobook where I did an intro. We met because of Buffy on Twitter back when I was writing a blog before, I'm pretty sure before there were podcasts, or at least before I knew there were podcasts. And I do sort of miss when some of the social media platforms were smaller and it seemed easier to connect directly and make friends with people. At the same time, there are still so many opportunities, and I am so grateful that I have been able to connect with many of you, not only through this podcast, but by following one another on Instagram or when you comment on Facebook or any of the other online opportunities to meet. I think my parents, who died in 2007, would be just blown away by the way that we can all connect with each other, especially that I do this podcast here in Chicago and people all over the world can hear it. I am always thrilled when I look at the different countries where people are listening, and likewise with my ebooks. I've sold books in countries that I am sort of embarrassed to admit I didn't even know existed. Geography, never one of my best subjects. And it is so exciting to know that we can share a love of this show and of so many other wonderful things out there all over the world now with so much ease compared to what our parents and grandparents went through. So thank you again for being part of this. I hope you will stick with me as I go into Angel, the series, whether you watched it and liked it more than Buffy, watched it and weren't into it, were somewhere in between, or haven't checked it out at all yet. I do hope you will stay on and share that with me. And a special thank you to the patrons who are part of the community and help support the podcast and keep it going out into the world. I am working on a new episode revisiting the first now that season 7 is done. And if you haven't yet, check out the bonus episode, A Hero Who Makes Mistakes, where I revisit some of Buffy's missteps through the whole series and why that makes her a stronger hero and a more relatable character. Buffy is very quiet. The first asks, where's her snappy comeback? But Buffy just says, you're right. And the first as Buffy responds, not your best. Spike, having a bad dream, yells out, I'm drowning in footwear, then awakens and asks if Buffy's all right. Quick note on what Spike says. I always heard it as I'm drowning in Cool Whip. According to the Buffy fandom wiki, the subtitles on Netflix, when it was streaming there, said I'm drowning in Cool Whip, but I believe the Amazon Prime ones say I'm drowning in footwear. And Whedon references that in his commentary, so it is footwear. And he said how fun it was to get to write a line like that. But back to something far more serious. When Spike asks Buffy if she's all right, she says something just occurred to her that she never thought of before. We're gonna win. And at 14 minutes, 17 seconds, we cut to commercial. We're a little past where we often see the first major plot turn that comes from outside the protagonist, spins the story in a new direction, and raises the stakes. But as I've noted other times, the turn doesn't always have to be exactly that, and not every story has it, though there is in every story with a good pace and momentum, there is some sort of shift that occurs around here. And this is it. It somewhat comes from outside of Buffy in that the conversation with the first sparks an idea. We don't know what it is yet, but this is where Buffy must get that idea about sharing her power. And I know it is the first major term because Joss Whedon commented that it was strange to end an act with an affirmation by the protagonist that she's going to win. But he did it here partly because it is so strange. And this is one of the things that I think didn't work for me the first time as I watched that particular moment, but by the end of the episode, I got it because at the time I'm like, oh, well, what does this do? Okay, I'm going to win. And I did not realize Buffy had this idea. So I really like that is a different sort of shift, and it doesn't raise the stakes so much for Buffy and everyone on her side because those stakes were already there. It actually raises it for the first because Buffy, for the first time, has a strong sense of how they can win this battle. And I take it back. I guess it does raise the stakes a bit because she's going to tell them they are going to go open the seal and engaged in this battle very soon. In the next scene, Buffy's friends gather in one of the bedrooms. They look stunned. Buffy is holding the scythe and asks what they think. Faith says it's pretty radical, and Giles says it's more than that. It upends everything every generation has done in the fight against evil. And he goes on, I think it's bloody brilliant. Buffy responds, you mean it? And Giles says, if you want my opinion. And Buffy says, really do. So more resolving any lingering tensions between them, making clear that bond is reestablished and has grown. It is not Giles as Watcher trying to tell Buffy what to do, or Buffy resisting against Giles, or Buffy needing Giles' approval. It is two equals. Buffy shares a plan. She seeks input. She has the confidence to ask everyone what they really think. And she and Giles respect one another enough to have that exchange. Willow interjects. She's the one who has to do this, and it's beyond anything she's ever done. She goes on, it's a total loss of control, and not in a nice, wholesome, my girlfriend has a pierced tongue kind of way. There's a pause while Giles studiously ignores that last part. Buffy says she wouldn't ask if she didn't think Willow could do it. Willow is uncertain, but Giles tells her she can, and they'll get the coven on the line and see how they can help. This affirms the reconnection between Giles and Willow, too. It shows how far Willow has come, and that Giles is encouraging and helping her, a nice contrast to the beginning of season 6 when he chastised her, somewhat rightly, for being reckless in using dark magic and all the dangers that created. So now they too are working together. Dawn says, oh, pierced tongue. Buffy says Dawn needs to research, and Giles says she does. Dawn says it's fine. Watcher Jr. to the rescue. Giles has to go dig up some sources. Literally, some of them are dead. Anya's ready to assemble the cannon fodder. Xander reminds her they're not calling them that. Anya says not to their faces. What am I, insensitive? Wonderful Anya line. Buffy hands Willow the scythe, and the two exchange a serious look. Joss Whedon commented that some people complained that the magic of the scythe was too convenient. And he said it didn't bother him because the phlebotomum, which is what he calls the magical device that either saves the day or creates the complications, is always secondary to what needs to be said. And this is about Willow's magic and what it means to her, and Buffy being the Slayer and what that means to Buffy. I never found the scythe too convenient. It fit for me because the Guardian talked about the last battle and waiting all this time for Buffy. So it fit to me that the phlebotomum Buffy needed to find, the scythe that Caleb was trying so hard to keep from her and to get for himself, would be something that could change everything for the Slayer line. Maybe it strikes people as too convenient for the same reason Joss Whedon noted about the cookie dough speech, that throughout the season there wasn't any hint of it. And I can sort of see that. It would have been nice to have some sort of seed. We don't want to know that this solution is out there. I love that Buffy comes up with it now, and we don't know it even yet. We don't know it till the very final battle. But if there had been a little more woven in about something, something that might be out there for Buffy to find. I can see why the writers didn't do that, though, because it is very powerful to have Buffy going forward through this season facing the ultimate evil and not knowing if there's a solution out there. That is a big part of the theme of the season and about war and about battles. You don't always know how you are going to deal with this, and that is one of the many scary things about it, and for Buffy about being a leader. The scene cuts to Buffy talking to all the potentials and all her friends in the living room. She tells them she hates being there. She hates that the potentials have to be there. She hates that there's evil and she was chosen to fight it. She wishes often she hadn't been, and she knows some of them also wish she hadn't been chosen. Kennedy's face is shown as she looks down when Buffy says that. Then Buffy tells them this is about choices. She believes they can beat the evil now. Tomorrow morning, she's opening the seal, going into the Hellmouth, and finishing this once and for all. She notes that they're all asking themselves why it's different, and she agrees. None of them have the power Buffy and Faith do. And Buffy goes on, so here's the part where you make a choice. The scene cuts, and we don't get the rest of the speech until later, so we don't know what the speech is. We cut to Robin Wood and Faith moving a giant copy machine to block off access to part of the sewer tunnels. They are in the school, so maybe the potentials were going somewhere underground near the school to find that arsenal last time. Maybe not. But Faith and Robin are blocking access so that if the Ubervams get past Buffy and Faith and the potentials, there's only one place to go, into the school. Faith says something about Robin needing to have a little faith, and he says he thinks he's had his share. Faith apologizes if it seemed like she was blowing him off the other day. She was just trying to blow him off. But she tells him it's nothing personal. Once she gets bouncy with a guy, there's not much else she needs to know. He tells her that's bleak, and he thought it might just be more of that defensive isolationist Slayer crap. Faith says something like, and he comes out swinging. Joss Whedon noted that Robin and Faith have great chemistry, and I agree, they really do, and that the scene deals with the isolated nature of being a Slayer, this time for Faith rather than Buffy, and that pays off at the end. I am not sure I read the Faith and Robin scene that way. Faith's views to me on men seem more rooted in her character and her personal life experiences than in being the Slayer. But I would have loved to know more about how being a Slayer was woven in with that. And it's so fascinating because her experience of being a Slayer is so different from Buffy's, much as the having a soul story is so different for Angel and Spike. Both of these parallel storylines, Buffy, Faith, Angel, Spike, are such a great example of in-depth characterization. Who these characters are is so intertwined with the circumstances of their lives, and that's why you can have arcs for them with similar major happenings and experiences, like becoming the Slayer, fighting as the Slayer, being a vampire without a soul, getting a soul. And they are not repetitive. It doesn't feel like a retread of the same ground. And it never feels like the writers are just moving them around to satisfy what they want to happen in the plot. And that's a great example of what I think of as organic storytelling that arises from those characters. Now, when you're constructing it as a writer, you could do it either way. You might start with the plot and create characters that fit it. You might create the characters and figure out the plot from that. Most writers, I suspect, do a bit of both, but I'm not sure you could find better examples than these. Robin tells Faith there are a lot of pretty decent guys out there and they might surprise her. The two of them joke about who is prettier than who, and he tells her their encounter didn't exactly change his world. She says it was amazing, but he says, well, maybe if she had a little more experience. Faith responds, dude, I got mad skills. This line, according to Whedon, came from Eliza Dushku when she was talking about serving ice cream because she had worked at a Dairy Queen, but he loved it so much he put it in this context. After making that protest, Faith says they'll go again now, and he tells her he'll make her a deal. They get through this. She gives him a chance to surprise her. Faith says, what would be the surprise? Robin responds, you do know the meaning of the word, right? She tells him fine, and they start moving more machinery. She tosses off another comment, no way you're prettier than me. And Robin says, little bit, yeah. We cut to Willow going through notes on the spell. It's late. She's in the bedroom with Kennedy. Kennedy promises she'll keep Willow grounded during the spell, and Willow tells her she might have to keep her stabbed and says, picture the darkest place there is, and this spell lies beyond that. Kennedy reassures her, telling her Buffy believes in Willow. And Willow says Buffy's a sweet girl, but not that bright. But Kennedy tells her she is the first one to call out Buffy when she's not making sense. But she agrees with Buffy now, and she admits to being kind of a brat who always gets her way. So Willow will make it through this because, quote, now you're my way, end quote. And they kiss, and Willow goes back to the spell. Joss Whedon commented on the character of Kennedy. They originally wanted to have Tara back, and when they couldn't work that out, he tried to write the opposite of Tara, the most unearthly, un-Tara-like character possible, which I think he succeeded at. And he wanted to end with them together because someone had to end the show with a good relationship, given that so many failed and struggled. The scene cuts to Giles and Xander talking through locations over a map and pointing out where the demons are. Andrew, in a red hood, tells Giles he has to roll the dice, and it becomes apparent they are playing a role-playing game with Amanda as well. Giles doesn't think this could get uglier. He used to be a highly respected watcher, and now he's a wounded dwarf with the mystical strength of a doily. He just wishes he could sleep. Amanda says who could on a night like this, and Xander says only the crazy ones and brushes his hand through Anya's hair. Anya is asleep with her head on the table. Whedon noted this scene was largely there to give Amanda screen time because she does die in the end, and the final battle needed to have a toll. I think Amanda, much as I wanted her to survive because I really liked her, was a good choice to show that toll. She's one of the potentials who really stands out among the Horde. Early on, she came to see Buffy. She was key to the episode potential where Dawn thought she was a potential slayer. I might have liked her incorporated into one of the more recent storylines in some way to highlight her a little more rather than this scene, only because I just wanted more of Xander, Willow, and Buffy together. However, that doesn't really fit with the rest of the way the episode plays out, and I wouldn't want to miss anything else. And I suspect there is no amount of putting those characters together that would have been satisfying because you're ending this 7-season series, and there's never going to be enough of it. Buffy stands outside on the porch looking up at the sky, and we cut to Spike in the basement staring at that pendant. Buffy comes down the stairs. She stands across the room from Spike, and they look at each other. Joss Whedon said when filming, they took a number of shots of Spike and Buffy standing like that in the basement, and he wasn't even sure he would use them. But this turned out to be one of the most important shots of the episode. He said it shows the mystery of their relationship, and he wanted the audience to fill in the blanks. Whatever you want to have happened did. If you believe on the last night they made love, great. If you believe they talked all night, great. If you think they had a fight, great. He wanted it to be up to the viewers for them to do the emotional work, and he thinks they earned that. And I think this was a perfect moment to leave to the viewers because people have such mixed feelings about Buffy and Spike. You can read many parts of their relationship differently, and this allows the audience to fill in what they believe happened between these two characters so that it fits with how they have experienced this show. This is about halfway through the episode. And as you know, that is where I look for the protagonist to make a major commitment, suffer a major reversal, or both. Here, Buffy makes that major commitment because in the next scene, a big yellow school bus is parked in front of the high school. Principal Wood leads everyone into the deserted school as if he's doing a tour. There's no running in the halls. There's only one rule. If they move, kill them. Xander points out the restrooms and suggests stopping there now. Faith and Spike take the potentials to the basement. Robin directs Willow to where his office is, and Buffy notes it's right over the seal. Kennedy takes Willow's things to get her set up. Robin tells the civilians there are only 3 ways the Ubervamps can get through to another building from the school and then down in the sewers, which I guess then leads everywhere in town. Giles says they should form in teams of 2. He and Robin will take one of the areas. Buffy wants Xander with Dawn, and Andrew and Anya take the North Hall. This is Buffy's commitment because now here they are going to open that seal. I have questions about these teams. Giles and Robin are the strongest fighters other than Buffy and Faith and Spike. So it seems odd that they are teamed and Buffy wants Dawn with Xander, who she said in a previous episode she worries about because he can't do depth perception as well. So she's leaving Dawn with him. And Andrew and Anya don't seem like a terribly strong team either. But on the other hand, they don't have a lot of options. Andrew says about the North Hall, we will defend it with our very lives. And Anya adds, yes, we will defend it with his very life. Xander tells Anya, don't be afraid to use Andrew as a human shield. Andrew starts to give a speech about how proud he is to die for this very special cause with them. And he unfolds a piece of paper, starts thanking people, does a shout out to his brother Tucker. And Anya says, nobody cares, you little monkey. Whedon said he loved Andrew's Oscar speech and that the reference to Tucker was important, that he likes these continuity references. Tucker was the one who appeared in the early season with the Hellhounds, and there's always been these references to Andrew as Tucker's brother. No one remembers who he is until he references Tucker, so it's kind of nice that he thanks him here. Dawn starts to walk off, and Buffy goes after her, but Dawn tells her no. Anything she says now will sound like goodbye. So Buffy watches Dawn walk away to her position. Then she turns, goes to the intersection of the hallways, and she, Xander, Willow, and Giles face one another. They joke about what they're going to do tomorrow, mini golf, shopping. Giles asks, are they really discussing this? Save the world? Go to the mall? As the other three walk away, trading jests about Xander's eye patch and his pirate look, Giles heads in the opposite direction and says, the Earth is definitely doomed. This is the exact line Giles said at the end of the pilot episode for the whole series. And Whedon said it was important that Giles say exactly those same words. He wanted all four of them to end together as they started together. Willow drifts off from Buffy and Xander. They all exchange looks but don't say anything. Buffy and Xander continue, then part ways at another hall. Buffy goes on and passes Spike, then heads underground. Whedon said he had a longer walk filmed for Buffy where she passes different parts of the school and remembers different things. Actually, I don't know if he said filmed or that he wrote it, but it was cut for time. I'm guessing if it had been able to be included, that might have satisfied some of that feeling that I missed seeing Buffy, Xander, and Willow together. I missed more of those senses of earlier parts of the series, that was probably meant to do that. And I understand with TV, you only have X amount of space and time to work with. Underground, Buffy and Faith stand in a circle with the potentials around the seal. Buffy cuts her hand, then Faith does hers, and each of the potentials does the same. They all hold their hands over the seal and bleed onto it. It opens, and Buffy leads the way downstairs into the seal. We cut to Willow. Candles burn around her, and she says to Kennedy, they should be in place. Okay, magic time. She sits cross-legged, giggles nervously, and asks if Kennedy's ready to kill her. Very serious, Kennedy says she's starting to be. Below ground, Spike tells Buffy his fancy jewelry isn't exactly tingling. Buffy says she's not worried. Faith tells him it won't matter what he wears if Willow's big spell doesn't work. Buffy approaches a ledge and looks down. There are tons of Ubervamps below. They're growling and moving around. There's a fire. Some smoke is rising. It's not clear what they're doing, but even Spike looks frightened. The potentials approach the edge too, and Buffy, now faltering a bit, says again she's not worried. Rona is. She's flashing back to Xander's whole bathroom speech, and Amanda says, Buffy? Buffy again says she's not worried as long as Willow can work her spell before they, and as she says, see us. The Ubervamps notice and charge up a steep grade toward Buffy and the potentials. Joss Whedon noted that there was new technology that did not exist during the first 6 years of the show that allowed creating thousands of Uber vamps. I'm assuming it was CGI technology. And that helped make this battle different from all the others. And they basically saved up most of their season budget to be able to afford to do that. It's a little early, but somewhere around this point in the story should be the last major plot turn that comes out of that midpoint and takes the story in another new direction and further raises the stakes. All these swarming Uber vamps definitely does that. Now, it's hard to say at what point this last part of the story becomes the climax. You could really see everything from here on as the climax or the final confrontation between the protagonist and the antagonist, or in this case, the protagonist as a group and the antagonist as a group. All of it from here on is action and escalating tension. We cut to Willow. Her hands are on the scythe, which is sitting on the floor in front of her. Her eyes are wide, and we close up on her face as she says, "Oh my goddess." The scythe flashes, streaks of light go up Willow's arms, and we cut to Buffy giving that speech we didn't get to see earlier to the potentials. And I'm including, which I never do, a recording from the episode because it seemed fitting for the end of the series.
So here's the part where you make a choice. What if you could have that power? Now, in every generation, one Slayer is born because a bunch of men who died thousands of years ago made up that rule. They were powerful men. This woman is more powerful than all of them combined. So I say we change the rule. I say my power should be our power. Tomorrow, Willow will use the essence of this scythe to change our destiny. From now on, every girl in the world who might be a Slayer will be a Slayer. Every girl who could have the power will have the power. Can stand up, will stand up. Slayers. Every one of us. Make your choice. Are you ready to be strong?
These guys are dust.
That is Violet at the end of the speech, but in the present moment above that seal. As Buffy talks, a montage of different girls and women becoming Slayers is shown. These include a girl in Little League at bat who straightens up and looks so confident, and a woman in a trailer who is on the floor and she stands and she stops an arm that was about to hit her. At the end, we cut to the battle scene as the potentials become Slayers. We see it in their body language and their faces and gain confidence, strength, and power, and the battle begins. This scene and the speech always makes me cry. Joss Whedon said he was afraid the Little League girl was too cheesy, but he got so many messages about it. Fans loved it. The sharing of power was something he knew he would end the season with because Buffy has always been so isolated. And this is something to keep in mind when you write that quite often the climax of a story is what carries the theme, both what the resolution is, who loses, who wins, what the cost is, and how we get there. And this is the how we get there part, tells you something about what this story says about the world. Everyone is fighting now. Amanda uses a giant staff and stakes an Uber vamp. We cut to Kennedy. She looks thrilled and powerful, and she says, "Willow." And we see that Willow's hair is completely white, and Willow looks so happy, not at all fearful or intense the way she sometimes does with magic. Kennedy says, "You are a goddess." And Willow says, "And you're a Slayer. get this to Buffy. She hands Kennedy the scythe. Kennedy leaves, and Willow falls on the floor sideways and says, "That was nifty." Triumphant music keeps playing as the new Slayers fight. Kennedy comes in and throws the scythe to Buffy. It twirls in the air. Kennedy fights an Ubervamp barehanded and says she could get used to this. Buffy swings and beheads several of the Ubervamps at a time. Whedon noted that some people complained that the Ubervamps were too easy to kill compared to the first time. And he agrees that that's true, but again, he was more interested in the empowerment theme than the continuity. When he said this on the DVD, I thought, that's it. That is why the first time I watched the episode, it didn't have that triumphant effect on me as much as it did on rewatches when I just kind of went with it, because that lack of continuity really bothered me. That first Ubervamp was almost impossible for Buffy to kill. And now Kennedy's fighting one by punching it out. I understand what Whedon is saying. And normally I find in Buffy that it works. When you really nail the emotion and the theme, I can look past some minor issues. We're all accepting the world of vampires and demons, and if there are a few things that don't quite line up, it doesn't matter. But for me, this was a huge issue added to the sort of squishy nature of the first as a whole, and I feel like it could have been addressed. I can headcanon that one, I have no problem with Buffy being able to behead a bunch of them with the scythe, because we know the scythe is very powerful, and it gave her an advantage with Caleb. So we could headcanon that that spell not only made them all Slayers, but gave them some extra boost of power. But the need to do that, as what I talked about in a previous episode, the need to resolve questions that aren't answered or ignore them, the need to figure out why it's so much easier to kill thousands of Ubervamps, is distracting when you want to be immersed in the story, whether or not you're consciously thinking about it. It's sort of like this tap, tap, tap on your brain when you want to be in the moment. So that might be my biggest concern, where I think the lack of continuity matters. All the same, they've already had to cut some important things, so there clearly was not a lot of room for these types of explanations, and it is a fantastic scene, and I love it more and more every time I watch. And then the lack of continuity about how hard it is to kill these things does not bother me. Some of the Ubervamps do get past Slayers and get up the stairs. Andrew says they're coming. Anya is stationed a bit ahead of him and says she's terrified. She didn't think she would be. She figured he'd be terrified and she'd be sarcastic. Andrew tells her to picture happy things like a lake or candy canes or bunnies, and Anya says bunnies, floppy, hoppy bunnies, and she raises the sword. Ubervamps swarm Giles and Robin, which makes me think maybe this is that most vulnerable spot, so that's why the two strongest are there. They fight. The scene cuts back to Anya and Andrew. He is knocked aside by an Ubervamp and says he has swimmer's ear. Whedon said Tom Lenk just said that, and Whedon loved it and kept it in. Spike starts to feel something, and he looks down at his pendant and calls out Buffy's name right before he starts to yell in pain. Buffy is yelling out instructions to the others, and a sword goes through her side from behind. She gasps, staggers forward, her eyes wide, and drops face down, and we cut to a commercial. This is what is sometimes called the dark night of the soul for the protagonist, where all seems lost. We think Buffy might be dead, and as we'll see when we get back from the commercial, the momentum starts to shift, and it looks like they will lose the battle. Faith keeps fighting, and then she sees Buffy face down, goes to her. Buffy lifts her head. It seems to take all her strength, grits her teeth, and says, "Hold the line." She hands Faith the scythe, and groans in pain. There's real suspense here since Buffy died in the season 5 finale, which was also written to be a series finale, and Buffy was dead at the end, so this creates genuine suspense. The handing over of the scythe, Whedon said the sharing of it was very important. It symbolizes sharing power. So we do see it, Kennedy to Buffy, Buffy to Faith, and Faith will ultimately give it back to Buffy. Faith spins around and starts swinging. The scene cuts to Xander. He's fighting with his sword. Dawn's in the background, and she grabs a rope. It's attached to some sort of fabric. She pulls that down, and sunlight floods the area and kills some of the Ubervamps. Xander jokes about the greenhouse effect. Then more Ubervamps swarm him. Anya is fighting when a large blade slices her from behind. It goes through from one shoulder to her waist on the opposite side. Whedon said Anya's death was one of the most brutal images in the show. It was an unheroic death meant to show a real battle, and was there because this battle, to be as epic as it was, to be as significant, needed to take a toll, but he couldn't have any of the key 4 characters or Dawn killed and still call it a happy ending. So that is that balance, another line the writers were walking. Unfortunately for me, the first time I watched, this happened so fast that I was confused about it. You could almost blink and miss it. And later when Andrew tells a story about it, I was like, oh, is that what happened? Like, what was Anya doing? But it is meant to be this unheroic death. So this is another moment I get more out of on rewatch when I know it's coming and I know to watch for it. Robin gets wounded as well in the stomach. He falls and Giles catches him. So this is that momentum shifting after Buffy goes down. And Ubervamp grabs a potential. There's a lot of screaming. Buffy sees Amanda fall dead right in front of her. The first as Buffy appears and taunts Buffy, a reference back to Buffy saying it should be called the Taunter. And the first as Buffy mocks her and says, "Mommy, this mortal wound is all itchy." And it crouches in front of Buffy and tells her she pulled a nice trick. She came pretty close. What more does she want? And the first as Buffy smiles. And Buffy says, "I want you to get out of my face." She pulls herself up as she speaks, and the first looks shocked. Buffy stands. Rona throws her the scythe. I think I said Faith. It's Rona. And Buffy swings. She kills more Ubervamps in a row. Faith is on the ground, surrounded, but as the music rises, she kicks several Ubervamps away at once, jumps to her feet, kills more. The other potentials, including Kennedy, fight harder. Violet kills a few. And Whedon noted that the music gives it this epic scale and said it was the equivalent of increasing the budget or doubling the budget for that battle by 2. And I agree, it really is a moving score that tells the story of this battle. Spike gets slugged. He staggers back against a wall and then says, "Oh, bullocks." And sunlight bursts out of him. It goes up, it goes sideways, it goes all around. He calls to Buffy. She runs to him. He tells her he can feel it. He says, "My soul, it's really there." Kind of stings. Everyone is getting out. They're running up the stairs and out of the school, which is shaking as if there's an earthquake. Buffy, though, is worried for Spike. And this way that pendant operates threw me the first time I watched, because if the pendant could do this and flood everything with sunlight, why did they need the battle at all? Why did the Slayers and the Potentials have to fight and get killed if this could happen and wipe out all the Ubervamps? Now, I can headcanon that this could not happen until there was some moment where the tide really turned in the battle, where they had killed X number of Ubervamps. It's another example, though, of questions tap, tap, tapping at me on first watch. Giles upstairs gets Robin out of the school. Xander's yelling for Anya, and we see that she's lying there dead, but she is behind rubble and he can't see her. Underground, Spike urges Buffy to leave, and she tells him no, she wants him to come with. He tells her she beat them back, he'll do the cleanup. So signal in dialogue that this was not meant to be, oh, Spike could have just killed everyone. And Spike says, think it's fair to say school's out for bloody summer, referencing the Alice Cooper song. Spike tells her he means it, he has to do this, but she joins hands with him. Flames rise from their clasped hands. She looks like she's in pain, but also happy, and she holds on and he stares into her eyes. And one more recording of this moment between them.
I love you.
No, you don't. So thanks for saying it.
After the crash, their hands break apart. Spike yells at her to go, and she finally does as more light bursts out of Spike, and he says, I want to see how it ends, and smiles. I always struggled a little bit with this scene, unsure what the feelings were. Did Buffy really mean to say, did she really love him? Why did Spike not accept that? Did he think she was just saying it? And Joss Whedon commented specifically on this scene that usually Sarah Michelle Gellar and James Marsters came into scenes already knowing where Joss was going and what he wanted. But this time, the first time through, they both played the terror of the moment and everything falling apart, and he wanted the romance. And he told them all the sound was going to fall away. And he told Sarah Michelle Gellar to love Spike when she says she loves him, and told James Marster to love Buffy when he tells her she doesn't. So I wonder if that is part of why I struggle with what the characters really mean here, what this moment is. And I know that some other fans do as well, because you'll see debates on Facebook of what it means. Did Buffy really love Spike? Why didn't he just accept it and say he loved her? And maybe the ambiguity is good. Maybe it works to have another moment where viewers can bring to it how they see these characters and their relationship. There's an explosion. After urging Buffy to leave, Faith runs out. She gets out of the school, jumps on the bus, and it drives away. Dawn is in the back window, worriedly peering out. Buffy finally runs upstairs through the smoke. Things are falling everywhere. Down below, Spike laughs as his face burns. It turns almost into charcoal and crumbles. On the bus, Violet yells at Rona that this is nothing. Stay awake. Xander helps some of the others. Andrew looks devastated and says to himself, why didn't I die? Buffy runs across the roofs of buildings that collapse right after she leaps from one to another. She's still holding that scythe, and the whole of Sunnydale is imploding. Finally, Buffy leaps onto the roof of the bus and lies flat, holding on and watching as the bus barely outraces the whole town collapsing. Inside, Faith finally says, ease off, we're clear. And the bus stops. Robin was driving and he lets out a gasp. We're now in the falling action. I don't see the climax as finishing until they are beyond that implosion and everyone who survived the battle is safe. Buffy leaps onto the street. Dawn jumps out of the bus and hugs her. Giles gets out too and says he doesn't understand. What did this? Buffy responds, Spike, which is really nice given all the doubts everyone had about Buffy keeping Spike alive and in the loop and on their side. Buffy's instincts about Spike were right. She walks over to the edge of that giant hole, and the Welcome to Sunnydale sign creaks and falls. Xander asks what happened to Anya, Andrew first says he was scared, he's sorry. Then he stops and he says Anya was incredible and she died saving his life. This is where I got confused the first time because I thought, wait, did she? Where was she? But she did not. Xander says, that's my girl, always doing the stupid thing. And Whedon commented that Anya's death was written to be senseless. But then Andrew discovers that something that he is mostly reviled for, making up stories, is a way to give Xander what he needs, meaning for Anya's death. And it gives Anya an epic death she didn't really have, but that the audience needs too. My missing that the first time around is an example of why it can be hard to make a final episode like this, because so much has to happen so fast. On the other hand, the fact that I saw so much more in it on rewatch is why Buffy as a series is so fantastic, because every time I watch, I see something more in it, and that is fantastic writing. Inside the bus, Faith tells Robin it's not bad, his injuries. She'll get someone. But Robin stops her and asks if they made it. She tells him they did. She says, we won. Robin's face then freezes. His breathing stops. The music turns sad. Faith reaches out to close his eyes, but is startled when Robin gasps, looks around, looks at her, and half laughs and says, surprise. Faith smiles at him. Violet comes to sit with him before Faith goes out of the bus to join the others. And Whedon commented, you can only have this kind of surprise where you think the character is dead and the person comes back. It only works if you have killed key characters for real before. And that's a choice as a writer if you're writing a story that involves death that you have to make if it's supernatural, or even if it's not. Are you going to kill off key characters? Because that is a certain kind of story, and that does raise the suspense throughout the rest because readers or the audience knows that that can happen. Or do you not want to write a story where that happens, which is also can be a really good story, and some audiences and readers are only going to want to watch or read that kind of story. They're not going to want to read something where there is that risk of an important character dying. The friends all gather near the edge of that giant crater where Sunnydale once was. Faith says it looks like the Hellmouths officially closed for business. Giles points out that there's another in Cleveland, not to spoil the moment. Xander comments that they saved the world, and Willow says they changed it. She can feel them all over. Slayers are awakening everywhere. Dawn says they'll have to find them, and Giles agrees because the mall was in Sunnydale, so there's no hope of going there tomorrow. Dawn says, we destroyed the mall? I fought on the wrong side. Xander jokes about all those shops, the Gap, Starbucks. Who will remember all those landmarks? Giles comments on all the work ahead of them, and Faith wants to push him into the crater. She just wants to sleep for a week. Dawn says they all could if they want. Willow agrees and jokingly asks Buffy what she thinks they should do. Faith says, yeah, you're not the one and only chosen anymore. Just gotta live like a person. How's that feel? And Dawn adds, yeah, Buffy, what are we going to do now? The music plays, the wind ruffles Buffy's hair, the camera closes up on her face. She looks so serious, but then she starts to smile, and we go to credits. Whedon said he had that last shot in mind from the start, and it shows closure, but not a closing because life goes on. Buffy's life is in progress. We've seen her life being formed, but in some ways, she is just beginning, just like her smile. I have to say, I didn't get all of that from her starting to smile, and I love that he said that because it helps me understand why Buffy doesn't say anything, why she doesn't have the last line, and why there are many references to the work going forward, which I liked even without the explanation. but it adds a layer to it. So that is it for Chosen. I cannot believe that was my last breakdown of a Buffy episode. So much to love in this finale. As you heard, I do feel like there were things that didn't work quite as well. And one of the other things Whedon talked about was how hard it was to write this, largely because he already wrote a series finale for the end of season 5. When they thought the show might be canceled, there was a pretty good chance, and it did end up shifting to another network. So he had already done it, and he said it was much harder to do it a second time, and harder because this time he knew this was it. This was really the end. Maybe at some point I'll compare the two finales, because I suspect that I might have struggled more with this episode on first watch because as the audience member, I knew it was the finale. Whereas when I watched the season 5 finale, I had no idea that Buffy was potentially being canceled, that there was any question over whether it would return. So I experienced it as a season finale, not as a series finale. I likely went into this with so many higher expectations and wanting so much more from it. So I would love to hear from you. Were there things you had wanted to see in the finale that you didn't? Do you feel like it worked perfectly just as it was? What were your favorite moments in it? There's so much to admire here. And at the same time, I am so sad that it is done. Thank you once again for listening, and I hope you'll come back in 2 weeks for an overview of the plot and character and theme issues in the last 5 episodes of season 7, starting with when Faith comes to Sunnydale and Caleb comes to Sunnydale. I feel like these 5 episodes are really one story. So let's see if that is the case and how the 5 episodes as a whole work as a finale. You can find back episodes of Buffy and the Art of Story, as well as the Buffy and the Art of Story books and all my fiction at lisalilly.com. To support the podcast, hear extra bonus content, and get each regular episode a few days early, join the Patreon community at patreon.com/LisaMLilly. That's Lisa, M as in Marie, Lilly. Music for this episode was written and performed by Robert Newcastle. Buffy and the Art of Story is a production of Spiny Woman LLC. Copyright 2024. All rights reserved.